get all set up and whatnot. Hello. Okay. Well, I may have just fixed the big computer. That's nice. There you go. Yeah, so once it very slowly opens for you on Blackboard, there is a section called SPSS, and there is a data set to download there. I'll just go ahead and download it so I have a clean version to work off of. Hey, look at that. We're gonna release it. Oh, man, and get the anciently slow computers going. Or if anyone has their own laptop, you can feel free to use that. There's a link on our Blackboard page. That shows you how to download it onto your own computer. So if you have your laptop, or if you want to do this at home at some point, there's there's a link right here for various computer software and printing, and you can download the SPSS home version.
If they want. That one's been loading forever, and I'm not sure what's going on here, so I'll just wait. Yeah, I didn't say the keyboard. Or not, you're fine. I'm gonna just observe.
Yep, that works too.
Also,
And
that
if you,
paper you got, that paper you gave me, okay, it's in here.
all right.
Well, not this one, but the one from Monday.
It's in there.
Oh, okay. So I was like, oh, the paper you gave me, I lost it. Oh. The score is.
Oh. Check and see if I got it.
Okay, yeah.
I thought I saw something.
All right, so I'm just gonna kind of float around a little and see how
Yeah, so
everybody's
this
doing.
Well, I think as long as we keep them
Some
together.
folks have been
hey,
close, it looks
Rich,
like some people
separate
are
them.
reading for
Yeah, screw it.
the very slow blue screen
What are we doing now?
under SPSS. Yep. And then the very first thing is the file for practice, so go ahead and download that.
Yeah, we're about to go over.
Yeah.
Where's SPS?
Okay, so go on Blackboard. Just on your browser. And then if you download the file and open it, SPSS will automatically open.
So you'll want to go either here or across.
right, I'm gonna come around and bring the an updated version of these instructions, exactly not sure how to get that. from my
Oh,
phone.
it's just you click it one.
Right here?
Oh, you know, that's, so if you decide you want to spend, then that's the amount.
I could keep saying.
I tell you what, I'll print somewhere else. $25.
My
Word.
keyboard's.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, sorry.
the new lesson. Just the new lesson.
Okay, and this document is also posted on Blackboard if you want to reference it later. I'm gonna give it like another 2 minutes for people to get on Blackboard, et cetera, and then we'll go ahead and get started. This is a lot better if you can just follow along, obviously, so.
Yeah, you did one,
Right?
cannot find it. You did all this.
Let's see if she'll get another one. Because remember, we had the identical, just like almost the same answer.
Okay, word.
What's that?
I have.
We need another one of these.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, I believe they're in, no, you know what, I'm out of them, so shoot me an email and I'll have to print another one.
Okay,
For Friday?
yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah,
yeah, so just shoot her an email.
yeah. Yeah, I would just send it to you, but it's actually pieces of like 5 different PDFs that I put together, so.
Oh, yeah. So, I'll just tell you after the class.
Okay, that's fine.
I don't want to hold too much up.
All good, all good. So yeah, just a reminder, if you have your exam done, you can turn that into me at the end of class. If you don't, you can either post it to Blackboard by midnight or put it under my office door if you want to print it by midnight, so. And again, it's open book, open note, open everything. So you go under our class, so 333.
Oh.
And then there's a thing for SPSS.
Which one is the link for?
The very first one is the assessment sample data is what you want to download. And that will just open the SPSS program for you. All right. Yeah, it might take a minute. This is actually, believe it or not, a lot better. When I first got here, we only had a license for SPSS you could use in certain computer labs. And only, I think, 10 copies of it could be open at a time. And so like when it was slow to load and students tried to open it again, that like took 2 licenses. So yeah, it's a lot better now.
That's a problem.
Yeah.
Well, what?
Alrighty, so for those of you who are able to be on and have the file open, awesome. I'm gonna start just familiarizing you with what SPSS looks like. For those of you whose computers are being ridiculously slow, feel free to look on with someone else until they can pull everything up. And you can also watch what I'm doing on the screens around the room. So SPSS is like a fancier Excel, basically. So if you're familiar with Excel or Google Sheets, this is pretty similar to that in terms of you enter data here. And so if you're someone who is doing your data collection online, you'll be able to like download and bring it into here. If you're going to collect your data in person, you can just hand enter these numbers like you'd put stuff into a regular spreadsheet. The main difference with SPSS, which actually makes it so much more helpful and useful for folks, is you also have this thing called variable view. So basically what variable view does is it allows you to take the like what would it be equivalent to your top row in an Excel spreadsheet, and give it a lot more background information about those variables. So the variables that are listed vertically here, back in data view, are horizontal. So it's almost like your top row is just locked, right? And so that's really nice. It's like the header row on a spreadsheet. And so in variable view, you get to name a variable. If you want to give it a different label than the name you gave it, you can do that. You can tell it things like, these are what the numbers mean. So for example, this is a data set I collected with some of my colleagues at my alma mater, Kenyon College. And so one of our variables is just, which college should you attend? And so this gives us a little cheat sheet that if they have a 1, it's Kenyon, and if it's a 2, it was at that time PWC. That was before our name change. And then things like, these are questionnaires similar to what y'all have been taking in class the past couple of days, where you're answering with one of those Likert scales. And so you get to tell it what those values mean. So this, just to familiarize you all with the type of work I do. I know this is a criticism I've gotten in the past when I teach SPSS, is they're like, Dr. Myers, we don't understand what you're talking about. So I study body image and variables related to it. So that's the type of variables that are related in here. So let me sort of expand this. You can see what these are called. The physical appearance comparison scale measures how much you're comparing your appearance to that of other people. The body appreciation scale is a measure of positive body image, how much you like your body. This is kind of a cool thing we do in my line of research, is we will give people a set of figures, and they range from like super skinny to obese. And we tell people, choose the one that looks like you. That's your current figure rating. And then we'll tell them, choose the one that you want your body to look like. And that's your ideal. And then you subtract them from each other, and that gives you a measure of body dissatisfaction. Basically the gap between where you are now and where you want to be. Body checking is a behavioral part of body dissatisfaction. It is behaviors you engage in, like I can see myself in this reflective surface of the window here. And so if I was engaging in body checking, I might kind of like, check everything out. How's it looking? For people with eating disorders, it gets even more obsessive. It's things like they try to see if their wrist has grown, things along those lines. And then the last one, which I realized I didn't put a label on, but is the CESD. This is a measure of depression that's standardized, using a lot of research. It's really good for research because there's no items about suicidality. So you don't need to sort of have ethical things in place for that. Some of these are already added up. So we'll be using those as we go through our practice here, and then you'll be adding some of them up yourself. BMI is another thing. It is just body mass index. It's a horrible measure of weight to height that doesn't really tell you much. But for some bizarre reason in my field of research, you have to report BMI, as much as we know how crappy it is. It's bizarre.
They also use it for measurements and like certain levels like fitness and stuff like that as well. So people competing and all that.
Right, and it doesn't make sense because muscle weighs more than fat. So like most athletes look like they're overweight or obese because they're just all muscle.
Right, so I don't know why they still use that.
Yeah, legit question. It was also like, I don't need to go too much into social historical things, but it was like normed on like a group of one village in France, and it was never meant to be an individual measure. Like, y'all, society, right? Okay, so if you get your little guide here, this will help you follow along as we do some stuff. So the really nice thing is, oh, yep, here we go. Most of the things we did at the beginning of the semester, SPSS will do for you. So that's really cool. So one of the basic things that it'll do is give you demographic information. So pretty much everything, if you're actually running an analysis, is going to come from this analyze menu at the top. It's like the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6th menu over. Okay, so if you go to analyze, then you'll see one that says descriptive statistics. And we're going to start with frequencies. So analyze, descriptive statistics, frequencies. Okay, frequencies will tell you how many and what percent of people in your sample answered a question a certain way. So maybe you want to look at something like age. All right, so you just find the variable age in the list. It's pretty close to the top in this data set. And there's a couple ways you can get it over. You can click on it once, then use this arrow over it, or you can just double click it and it'll go over automatically. So basically, if you either arrow it over or double click something in SPSS, you're telling it, I want to work with this variable right now. So after you do that, go ahead and click OK. And what you'll see is, because this was mostly college students, we have a lot of 18 to 22-year-olds, right? And then we had some people who were quote unquote non-traditional age. Looking at this, right, this is not a great way to get an indication of age, right? There's a lot of numbers. It's a little overwhelming. So probably our best way to look at age will actually be to look at mean and standard deviation. So if you go back to analyze, descriptive statistics, this time you're going to go the second one down, which says descriptives. Okay, and again, put age over there. And this time, when you hit OK, it will calculate the mean and the standard deviation for you. So think about everything we did at the beginning of the semester to calculate a standard deviation, and then think about how fast that was. I just like to remind people of that because I routinely hear people say, oh, I hate SPSS, it's awful. And I'm just like, do you want to calculate this by hand, right? For you all, maybe 30 people. This data set, I think, has over 100, right? Like, no thanks. So if you learn to work with SPSS, it's your friend. It's very, very helpful. Yeah. If you scroll down, it should pop up. Ta-da! Exactly. So yeah, once you all have your data from your questionnaires, you'll be able to run something like this and find out the average age for the people who took your survey.
So even if we don't like take people's age down, we would still be able to-
No, you need to, SPSS can only work with the information you give it, if that makes sense. So yeah, so this is something to think about if you haven't started giving your questionnaire yet. What questions in those demographics do you want to ask? Do you want to know about your age? Do you want to know about gender? Do you want to know about relationship status? Things like that. Alrighty. So the next thing I'm going to teach you, so after you get your data, right, you're going to have data from 3 questionnaires, but really the way it's going to be there in raw form is however many items are on those 3 questionnaires, right? So like if the questionnaire you designed was 10 items, you have those 10, plus let's just say they were each 10 for simplicity's sake, plus the 10 from your second questionnaire, plus the 10 from your third questionnaire, right? The second and third being the 2 published ones. So that's 30 different items, right? But you want to be able to compare just those 3 scales, right? And so what this allows you to do is to combine that data. So this is something that routinely happens, not only in this class, but I think even when people are doing their capstone project, they think they have to add up those questionnaires by hand, like y'all did for your individual ones the other day. No, put the data in raw to SPSS, just put how every person answered every question, and then SPSS will do it all for you. So I'll remind you of that as we keep analyzing the data. We've got a lot of group project work days coming up, so I can help you all with that. But just sort of like think of that going forward. All right, so we're going to do that. So first we need to find out if any items should be reverse coded. So this means that the items were purposely written so that they're scored the opposite way. So for those of you who have already scored the STAI, you saw some of this, right? Where sometimes like if you answered a 1, you actually had to score it a 4. So that is just to kind of, I don't want to say throw people off, but essentially not make it as obvious what you're trying to measure. So for example, we're going to use that HAX, that measure of appearance comparison. And I know that there's one item that's reverse coded on that. Now, how will you know this? The original article or scoring instructions for the surveys that you've gotten that are already published will tell you this. Sorry, guys, ever since I've been sick, I just can't talk for an hour without drinking water anymore. So here I go. Okay. I was doing really well until I got sick and now it's like, nope. Okay. So we're going to go transform.
It does.
And you're going to recode into different variables. Now you'll notice there is an option to recode into the same variable. Every statistics professor I've ever had told me never to do that. Because what happens then is it writes over your existing data. And if you screwed it up, then now you have to go back to your raw data and re-enter for that item. So just always put it in another variable. SPSS doesn't have a cap on the number of variables. I've seen data sets with like literally hundreds of variables in them, right? So just do it in a different variable just in case, right? So now what we're gonna do is we're gonna find the variable PAX4, again, not too far down our list. So PACS4. And again, arrow that over in your recode into different variables box. Then you get to call it a new name. So let's call it PAX, oops, helps if I spell it right, 4R. This is my traditional naming convention. Then I know it's the same item, I just recoded it, okay? And then you have to hit change. And then you'll see SPSS is understanding, okay, you want me to take the information in PAX4 and recode it into this new variable, PAX4R. So then you hit old and new values. And this allows you to tell SPSS how to recode it. So before doing this, you would have to know how was it scored in the first place, right? Is it 0 to 4, 1 to 7? What is it? I happen to know this questionnaire because I use it a lot. It goes from 1 to 5, okay? And so what we're gonna do is just tell SPSS, flip those values. So we say if they scored a 1, if the old value is 1, now we want you to make it a 5. And then after each one, you have to hit add. And then we say if they scored a 2, now we want you to make it a 4. Here's the thing, when you get to this point, SPSS is only as smart as what you tell it to do. So you do have to tell SPSS, if they scored a 3, keep it a 3. And you also have to tell SPSS, even though you just told it, if it's a 2, make it a 4, you still have to tell it if it's a 4, make it a 2. And same thing, if it's a 5, make it a 1. Okay, so after you have those in, make sure you've got 1 to 5. Then you would go ahead and hit continue. And then SPSS, always the thing that tells you what to run is just hit OK. All right, so when your output pops up here, it'll look like kind of nothing happened because you'll just see instructions. But if you go to your variable view here and just scroll all the way down to the bottom of that, you'll see that now this new variable we just recoded exists. So, and if you were to go to data view and scroll all the way over, you'll see that not only does it exist, it's been populated with values that SPSS went through and recoded that variable for us. So again, this is something that people often try to do by themselves. If they know an item is recoded, they'll try to like do it in their head when they enter it. You don't need to do that. SPSS will do this for you. Alrighty. Questions about that? Cool. So once you have all the items recoded, you need to recode, or there might be some questionnaires you all have that don't have any recodes, right? And that's fine. What you're gonna need to do is add them up in order to get a score you're gonna work with. Now, this is another place where you, with your new questionnaire, have to decide and look at the scoring instructions for the old questionnaires that you, the ones that are published, and see, is it just a straight sum? Is it supposed to be an average of the scores, right? So for your questionnaires, you get to decide that. I think the majority of questionnaires I use are sums, but there are some that they choose to average. In the long run, it doesn't matter. You're still going to get the variability. If you do correlations, it's still going to be the same. That's just something to think about for yourself. The PACS is a straight sum. So we'll go ahead and do that. So here you're going to go to transform, and now you're going to go to the first one on the list, which is compute variable. So you're telling SPSS, please create this variable for me. So we're going to call this PACS total. People will often call them PACS, like the name of the scale total or full scale, you know, something that makes sense to you. And then you could do a couple different things here. So just like we've been doing, you can arrow each of these variables over, or you can actually, if you trust yourself not to make typos, just type it out in this text box here as well. I don't trust myself not to make typos, so I'm going to go ahead and just arrow each one over. So PACS 1, and then you just put a plus sign in between, just telling it, hey, add these up. But then remember, when you get to PACS 4, we didn't do all that work we just did for nothing. So we want to make sure we go down and get that recoded one, right? If you don't, then your scores will end up weird because you're adding something in the opposite direction. And then we add PACS 5. So it should be PACS 1 plus PACS 2 plus PACS 3 plus PACS 4R plus PACS 5. Once you have that, go ahead and hit OK. And again, it'll look like nothing much happened, right? But if you look here, you now have a PACS total variable with values populated into it, and they should make sense for something that's scored 1 to 5 that has 5 items. Alrighty, so once you've done all that good stuff for all your variables, and these are things that, like, you know, things like frequencies you can report on your poster for your data, for example, then you get to do the actual things that you're proposing with your hypotheses in your IRB. So one of the things that's in everybody's hypotheses, because I wrote it in there for y'all, is to think about the reliability of the questionnaire. So you go to analyze here, then go about 2/3 of the way down. You'll see there's something that says scale. And then we'll see reliability analysis. Okay. So analyze scale reliability analysis. So let's use the PACS again, just because we've been working with it, we're familiar with it now. And again, you want to either double click or arrow over each item. And if you know which items you need, you can also like select all and put them over. Again, remember, we want to use that recoded one or it'll mess with our reliability. So make sure you have PACS 4R instead of just PACS 4. Okay, and then once you've got all 5 of those variables in the list, there's a little button on the right-hand side of that pop-up box that says statistics. Go ahead and click that. And then I've given you some things to check here. So click on descriptors for item, descriptors for scale, descriptors for scale if item deleted. And then inter-item correlations. So basically, what these things are going to do, and then we're also going to do the summaries for means, variances, covariances, and correlations. But what these do, we don't need covariances, sorry, I'm trying to talk while clicking and it's not great. What these are going to do is tell you not only the reliability of the scale, but would that reliability differ if I got rid of one of my items, for example. All right, so again, we're clicking all the ones under descriptives. We're clicking inter-item correlations. That just means it's going to correlate each individual item to each other individual item. And then we're getting the summaries for means, variances, and correlations. So go ahead and click continue. And then you can call this scale something. I'm just going to call it PACS full scale. You don't even have to give it a label if you don't want to. All right, and you'll see the model it's set using by standard is alpha. So we're using that alpha, that Jesus fish, that measure of internal consistency. Okay. So what you can see here is it tells you at the top how many people this data set had a lot. So 220 people. And they all had data on all these items, which is good. And then here's the Cronbach's alpha. So one of the things you'll notice right away is the alpha isn't super great for this scale. I mean, it's in the acceptable range for research, but I wouldn't want to use this in clinical practice, right? Because it's 0.78 and really in clinical practice, you want it 0.9 or above. The reason I use this as an example is just to show you all it's okay, particularly for your created questionnaire, if you get a crummy reliability. You are not going to be judged by how good your numbers are. You're just going to be judged by you doing the analyses and then explaining them. Okay, so I think people freak out about this sometimes and they're like, our reliability is really low. And I'm like, that's cool, you learned something, right? And there's is where it can start to give you more information about that. So here you can see it gives you the mean score and the standard deviation for each item. So how they scored overall. This shows you how the items are correlated with each other. So you can see that reverse scored one we did, maybe it's just a crummy item, right? Doesn't seem to correlate that highly with the rest of the scale. It's not negative, so the reverse coding was good, that we did what we needed to do, right? But maybe not great. And so, it also tells us what are the means overall, the variances, the correlations, and then what would be the scale mean or the Cronbach's alpha if you deleted it. So remember, Cronbach's alpha is that Jesus fish symbol, is the measure of internal consistency. And so looking at this, it actually says if we got rid of that item we reverse coded, our internal consistency would go above 0.8 and would be considered good. So as you look at your questionnaires, that's something to ask yourself. Are there questions, single questions, that if you deleted them, your reliability would increase? And this is really common. The people who create the MMPI, the people who created all the questionnaires you took the other day do stuff like this whenever they create scales. And if it says, this is just not good, it's not fitting with the other data, then yeah, they might get rid of that item. And obviously that's easier if you have a longer questionnaire than if you have a 5-item one and you're sort of worried about losing variability. All right, so you have just found reliability. Woohoo! The next thing that we're going to do is to look at how you would analyze validity. So we're going to look at convergent validity first, which I've called on the walkthrough sheet convergent evidence for construct validity. So you just use correlations to do that. Let me open this more so you guys can see a little better. So again, you're going to go to analyze. Almost halfway down, you're going to see correlate. And then you're going to see bivariate is the first option. So analyze, correlate, bivariate. And that'll get you to the window that will let you run a correlation. All right, so go down to the bottom and get that PAX total that you created. And the measure we're going to use to compare it with is the body appreciation scale. So it comes up BASFS, full scale. Okay, that's a measure of body image appreciation. So in theory, if we're looking at something like how much are you comparing your image to someone and we think that's going to negatively affect you, then body image, body appreciation should be able to tell us if that's happening, right? So here is, and again, the reason I gave this example is that it is a negative correlation, and that's okay. Remember that we're always kind of looking at the absolute value, and sometimes things are just scored in different directions, right? So the PAX, the higher your score is, the more you're engaging in these comparisons that are probably going to make you feel crummy about yourself. The BAS, the higher your score is, the better you feel about your body. So it makes sense that as you're high on one, you're low on the other. So what this is telling you is that the correlation between these two scales is negative 0.40. It tells you your p-value. So where it says sig two-tailed, that's your p-value. So this is a great p. P is less than 0.001. So that's, less than a 0.1 chance that this happened by chance, right? So this is evidence for convergent validity because these things are correlated significantly.
Yeah.
Woohoo! And again, if you don't find that with your data, that's cool. I'm not going to knock your grade off if you don't find good numbers. I'm just going to knock your grade off if you don't explain why that might be, if that makes sense. All right, so now we're going to do divergent evidence or divergent validity. So go back to analyze, correlate, bivariate. And now you can get rid of the BAS. And we're going to look at that depression scale that I mentioned. Because in theory, if we're thinking this is related to body image, it shouldn't be as related to depression, right? So this is near the bottom, and it's called CESD-FS, CESD full scale. You want to keep the PAX total in there and put in the CESD full scale. So after you've done that, you go ahead and click OK. And what you find is it is significant, and sometimes you do find this, but it is a smaller magnitude correlation. So that is showing us there is some difference here, right? It's not as strong of a relationship. And just like intuitively from what we know about mental health, if we think about what we've learned about the MMPI, right? Just knowing that like demoralization, feeling bad can contribute to things across the spectrum of diagnoses, right? It makes sense that if you're feeling bad after comparing yourself to someone, that might be linked to depression at least a little bit. So I would argue this is still evidence for divergent validity. It doesn't have to be non-significant. It just shows it's not as significant. It's not measuring this. Alrighty, so we have about 10 minutes left in class. And if you don't get to this, remember you can always download it onto your own computer, or any computer lab on campus has this. So I am giving you all an assignment, and you're going to do the types of stuff. That computer doesn't it? You're going to do the types of stuff you just did, and there are 5 questions. Once you get pretty good at clicking, you could probably do these in like 2 minutes. But I think you can finish them in the 10 minutes. And there you go. And if you don't finish it now, like I said, you can come later, and I am here for questions. So please flag me down if you get stuck. I'm going to turn these off just because I'm going to unplug my computer. So. Yeah, either one of you just email me to remind me, because otherwise I'll forget. My perspective memory is really bad. Yeah. Yeah, I think I might have called it something differently when I first did it, but yeah.
Beard is like coming up.
Like eating my hair.
And Elijah, since they're just doing an assignment, so you don't have to look at nothingness, I'm gonna go ahead and sign off.